Hello, 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 and welcome to a special edition of our live show. Now, right now, as I talk and as you listen, a bloodbath is taking place in Gaza and beyond. Now, that bloodbath concerns you for two principal reasons. Firstly, your humanity, that you should abhor suffering and death imposed upon your fellow innocent civilians wherever they are. But secondly, and this is extremely important, because this bloodbath is happening with the direct complicity and involvement of Western governments. Even if you were to strip away the power dynamics at play, which would leave you unable to understand a single thing happening right now, our governments do not back or arm Hamas. They arm and back Israel. Now, the vast majority of us were disgusted by the atrocities committed by Hamas against Israeli civilians. What we are now seeing is a military superpower unleash unimaginable horror against a strip of land around the size of Washington, D.C., a tiny strip of land which has been subjected to a 15-year blockade by land, air and sea, a brutal siege which under international law is under occupation, with Israel in control of its water, food, the works. Now, senior Israeli government officials and figures have declared a total siege, cutting off all electricity, water and food. This is collective punishment, and that is illegal under international law. It is a war crime. They are issuing blood-curdling threats to reduce Gaza to a city of tents, for example. They have ordered Gazans to flee, but it is impossible to flee Gaza. It is the world's largest open-air prison. Now, right now, many hundreds of civilians are dying, including at least 300 children. Now, 80% of Gazans depend on international humanitarian assistance to survive. Around half of the population of Gaza are children. That context is crucial, and there is an attempt by much of the media to strip any context as somehow being apologism. What Palestine has been subjected to is the longest occupation in modern times. Now, before these horrifying and truly repulsive events occurred, around 96% of those who had died in the last 15 years were Palestinians. That isn't to minimize the deaths of anyone, but it is important to emphasize the humanity of Palestinians, which has been stripped away entirely. Before the atrocity committed by Hamas, this year alone, 248 Palestinian civilians were killed, 40 of them children. And it is controversial, even outrageous in this climate, to say that Palestinian lives matter. They are of equal inherent worth to an Israeli civilian life, a British civilian life, an American civilian life. But that is not how this is being treated. The media in this country are not accepting the equal humanity of the Palestinian people. In no way is that reflected in their coverage, and that goes for politicians. Our government, the Conservative government in Britain, and the opposition Labour Party are supporting what Israel is unleashing, which is in violation of international law. Now, treating life as inferior to another because of their inherent racialized characteristics, there is a word for that, and it is called racism. And that racism is defining the way that this is being covered. Now, in this show and beyond, I will be elevating the voices we need to hear from. I will be using my channel as best I can in the coming days and weeks and months to elevate those voices. Palestinians in the Middle East and elsewhere, Israeli peace activists, and we will try and offer an alternative to the coverage we are seeing on much of the mainstream media as best I can. I have tried to battle myself on Sky News the other day. Many of you may have seen Margaret Hodge, a former Labour MP. I denounced Hamas's atrocity at great length. And as soon as I spoke about the suffering imposed upon the Palestinian people, I was shouted down. Now, we will stick to the facts. Facts matter in horrors such as this. They can become a matter of life and death. Now, before I bring in our first brilliant guest, let's just hear from Al Jazeera's Gaza correspondent, Yunmer El Sayed, just to provide some context about what Gaza is currently enduring.
Bombardments are still very heavy. Artillery shells and gunboats still bombarding many homes in the Gaza Strip. What we're seeing is the carpet bombardment strategy that Israel is using, which means that it is leveling entire neighborhoods, bombarding the entire neighborhoods with all its buildings, like what is happening now in several neighborhoods, what happened in Karama yesterday neighborhood, today in Al-Mukhabarat neighborhoods, Haras Rais neighborhood. These are all residential neighborhoods that I'm talking about in Gaza city itself. And the bombardment is still going on very intensively, not just from the air, but from the air, from the sea, and from the land through the tank shells that are targeting many areas now.
Now, if you're watching, please like and subscribe and support the video, because we're trying to elevate these voices. So do share this video far and wide. I know the vast majority of you don't watch live, but do like and share the video as best you can, and let's make sure we get the voices that need to be heard as widely as possible. And I should say, just quickly, a note about what the journalists are going through. Several Palestinian journalists have been killed. It's extremely dangerous, obviously, to be in Gaza. Several medics have been killed. A medic, an activist I've known for many years, their friend, who is a senior medic, has just been killed in Gaza. UN officials are being killed. I mean, that itself, I think, just is testament to the sort of indiscriminate slaughter that we're seeing. You can also use Super Chat to put questions to the guests and support the show. Now, I'm going to bring in Sarit Michaeli from B'Tselem, who are an incredible human rights organization in Israel itself. And I have to say, Sarit, your work is courageous at the best of times, and it isn't easy. And it couldn't be harder still. So it's an honor to have you with us. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So this is the first live show I've done since the atrocities began. So I do want to begin with what we know about the attack from Hamas and the reality on the ground. So if you could just explain what do we know in terms of the attack on civilian lives and the atrocities committed, because it is important that we speak truthfully and honestly about the whole range of events. So if you could just explain, what do we know has dreadfully occurred?
Yeah, no, I totally agree that we have to talk about the facts, as horrific and as difficult and as dissonance invoking they might be. So on Saturday morning, there was a very, very large scale invasion of Hamas militants into southern Israel, accompanied with a massive bombardment. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but because they're also still emerging. We did not know anything in the first few hours, and slowly the picture emerged of massive carnage of civilians, of attacks directed against homes in the Gaza perimeter, in communities in the Gaza perimeter, in civilians in those homes, and against civilians in various other slightly larger communities a bit further off Gaza, and also against a very large number, hundreds of young Israelis in a rave, in a party that was held in that area. And we're talking about a planned and organized and orchestrated attack. I think it's very important to acknowledge this, because there have been also discussions now that some of these, horrors, atrocities, war crimes that have been committed were kind of like the initiative of individuals. I think that's quite a shameful accusation. They were conducted by the military wing of Hamas, and also I think of Islamic Jihad, that has a very clear command chain, right? These are planned, premeditated attacks. There's also a lot of very credible reports by credible journalists and reporters who demonstrated examples. For example, a large number of cars, vans that were used to bring in these militants into Israel, equipment that they used. So all of this was clearly premeditated. And in addition to this massive killing, deliberate, willful killing of civilians, there were also attacks against this military infrastructure and against soldiers that led, I think, basically to the collapse of any sort of military response of the Israeli security forces. Additionally, it is emerging now, or it has emerged, that many military units were transferred from the Gaza perimeter to the West Bank in order to safeguard various settlement and settler activities in the days and weeks before this attack. And one crucial issue additionally to mention was that the militants and possibly other Palestinians who entered Israel also kidnapped over 150 Israeli civilians. The numbers are not clear yet. Again, women, in some cases children and toddlers, in some cases the elderly and people who are ill and need treatment, and they are currently held in the Gaza Strip and their whereabouts unknown. I think again the absolute horrors of what has been happening in the south of Israel is just slowly trickling out, and every day brings new realizations and also new names and faces and friends and relatives of everyone we know. I think every Israeli here is aware and is familiar and knows people who either themselves were lost in the events of Saturday or kidnapped, including many people from our movement, from the peace and human rights movement. And I think that's, the fact that they have these politics certainly not relevant to their captivity, but they are, I think, certainly relevant to the context in which this event occurred internally inside Israel, which is a context of almost a year, right, of almost 10 months of a government that has been inciting against the left, against Israelis who promote human rights, like myself and my colleagues, and accusing us of various accusations, including that we're, this whole conversation in the run-up in the debate around the judicial coup, and I think all of this is crucial because maybe one final point to mention in terms of the context is that this attack, this terrible war crime perpetrated by Hamas, has also exposed the total breakdown of a functioning government and public service structure in Israel, which many Israelis, myself included, but not just people from the left or from the human rights movement, are showing was the result of the way this government has been functioning. I mean, on the both on the individual level of ministers involved in, only trying to promote this judicial coup, but also in the systematic breakdown of functioning institutions in Prime Minister Netanyahu's attempt to evade his trial. And maybe then one final issue, which is a massive risk, and I know some wonderful interviews will discuss it later, a massive risk of intra-escalation, internal escalation in our own society. And it's incredible to see Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs working now to avert this risk. So this is a very, very short description, I think, of what has been occurring.
And a very powerful description it was too, Sarit. In terms of what's obviously happening on the ground in Gaza, and in terms of the rhetoric that's coming from the Israeli state, because, in the past, you will hear claims from the Israeli state, we don't target civilians, etc., etc. But a lot of the rhetoric has been blood-curdling, I would say. And for example, stating we are targeting for damage, not for accuracy. We will reduce Gaza to a city of tents, and just very vicious. And we are fighting human animals. Kind of genocidal language, I would say. What does that tell us about the because a ground invasion now seems likely? What does that tell us about? I mean, what do we know is happening? Firstly, on the ground, because that's obviously very hard given the situation in Gaza to find out. But what are you hearing on the ground in Gaza, and what, given the rhetoric?
So the rhetoric is also reflected in what we have seen happening on the ground, both in terms of the absolute broad and indiscriminate nature of the attack, the airstrikes that we see, but also in terms of the absolutely shocking shutting off of any kind of humanitarian assistance and any kind of humanitarian services to Gaza. Israel shut off the water and electricity that it sells on a normal basis to Gaza because there are virtually no potable water drinkable in Gaza, not enough electricity for any kind of basic survival of the population. These are, I should also say that in past Israeli operations, wars, against the population of the Gaza Strip, there have been indiscriminate attacks that we characterize were clearly indiscriminate and targeted civilians and the civilian population. But this level, this scope of attack and this level and scope of like a total negation of any sort of humanitarian need is unprecedented, and it is simply staggering. I mean, I think the real risk that 2 million residents of Gaza are going to have to deal with no electricity, no water, and no food, because food is also running out, is real. And this is not, it does not appear as if there is any action on behalf, certainly not of the Israeli government, but of the international community that gave Israel carte blanche with all of these support statements. It does not look like the international community is really accepting that the result of these Israeli actions is an absolute devastation of the civilian population of 2 million human beings who are living in Gaza. I have to say that on an individual level, I have colleagues and I have people who work with me and partners and friends, and I've tried to talk to them and listen to them, and the stories that are coming out both individually in these phone calls and also in the media are just absolutely shocking. And these are people who are used to war upon war upon war and siege and are living something that they all describe as unprecedented. And I think, what we've been trying to do at B'Tselem with our very, very minor ability is to say the very basic thing that I think any person who cares about the humanity of ourselves as well as the humanity of others is that the horrors that have been inflicted on us cannot justify this sort of treatment of Palestinians. I understand that I'm in the minority currently as an Israeli. It's clear, and we have to accept that and acknowledge the reality that many Israelis, the majority possibly of Israelis, are now asking for revenge, and this is what our government is doing. But I also know that there are many other Israelis, both Jews and Arabs, who do agree with me. And we are making our voice heard on social media, and we are talking about how this is not the way, beyond the fact that it's simply morally abhorrent to have this policy of revenge, to exert revenge on 2 million civilians who, like myself, did not elect the government that controls them, have no control over this. Beyond that, it's also going to lead just to more and more carnage, to a future where we are all just expected to kind of live through these periods of horror and carnage without any kind of hope. So this is the message, and I know we're few, but there are people who agree with us on both sides.
And just a couple of other things. We're very lucky to have you, and it's an extremely busy time for you, to say the least. I mean, Rohan Talbot, who's director of advocacy and campaigns at Medical Aid for Palestinians here in Britain, and he says Gaza's health system has started to collapse. 1,354 killed, over 6,000 injured, savable cases dying due to lack of capacity, staff, resources, beds, ICUs are filled, operating theatres are filled. There's not even enough space in the corridor. This is slaughter. And that's the point, isn't it? It's not just people, it's the bombs that drop, but it's the fact that the entire health system is in a state of collapse.
Absolutely. And on a very basic level, the lack of electricity means people cannot pump water up to their homes, the homes that are survived. Many people I know who have either their own homes were just basically bombarded and don't exist any longer, or have relatives trapped in homes that have collapsed without any ability to call for help, to have any kind of like emergency services that will be somehow pulling them out of the rubble, because there's virtually no capacity currently. I just simply cannot express enough how, as an Israeli who has looked at people in my own country suffer such a horrific attack, none of this can provide any sort of support, comfort, or future for us, for as long as we continue to follow the same path of revenge. Now, I understand that currently there isn't a lot of willingness of people to hear, both internationally and in Israel, but I do think that we have to work towards de-escalation, and we have to demand, the international community has to pressure Israel to accept a prisoner swap in order to bring these more or less 150 Israelis back home. This has to be the first step that could, I pray, I hope, lead possibly to de-escalation, and certainly not to allow the additional escalation, which is happening also in the West Bank, where Israeli settlers are simply using this opportunity to take over land, to forcibly transfer Palestinian herder communities, while all of this is happening around in the Gaza perimeter and in Gaza.
Sorry, I can't express my gratitude just for the time you've been able to spend with us. And
I'm absolutely also so happy to be able to raise this voice and to say these things. Thank you, Owen.
It's a huge honor. And for those who aren't aware of B'Tselem's work, do look up B'Tselem and support them in any way you can. Share their material. They're incredibly courageous and brave, and we desperately need them more than ever. So thank you, Sarit, so much, and all my love and solidarity.
Thank you very much.
It's hard to listen to. It's hard to listen to this, and but we do have to listen to this. I'm going to bring in now Saleh Abed, who we're very lucky to have, who is one of the leaders of Standing Together, which brings together Arabs and Jews in Israel in the fight for peace. Saleh, I guess I wanted to start on just a basic human question, if you don't mind me asking, because you're a Palestinian who actually lives in Israel. What are your just thoughts from that vantage point? I mean, this is in terms of everything that's happened since Saturday, what are the emotions that are going through your head?
I think we have a duality of experience that is very, very tough to navigate. We are experiencing the trauma, our society, we live within the Israeli society. As Sarit also said, many of our colleagues and partners within the anti-occupation community and social justice community have been heavily, directly impacted by this. Some of them lost their lives, some of them lost loved ones, some of them are currently captives in Gaza. And so we live this fear and insecurity, but we are also immediately labeled traitors until proven loyal within Israeli society. It's a very difficult situation to be in a sense that you are, you have to, there's no space for us to mourn our people while we are also mourning, our friends and colleagues here. And we are extremely worried, especially here in mixed cities. I'm here in Haifa. We are seeing many people, many organized groups getting armed and getting ready and getting to go. It's very scary to go on the streets and just speak Arabic and look around and just make sure that no one is actually having a reaction to it. It's hard to articulate.
Of course. Well, that was very powerfully done. I was going to just show a quick clip from a doctor in Gaza, and I just wanted kind of your response to it. I know you've been on British media outlets. I have to apologize for that, having worked in the British media now for 12 years. We've got an interesting media ecosystem here. Let me just put this clip and just to get your response to this.
We've heard the Israeli Prime Minister say this is only the beginning. Can you imagine what it is going to be like where you are if we go into week 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
The beginning for the Palestinians was in 48, and it's been continuing for 75 years. My generation lived through the Israeli invasion and the siege of Beirut in 82, and we saw that destruction 30,000 killed. It ended with the Israelis allowing the massacre of Sabra and Shatila.
Yes.
If the Israelis want to repeat that again, then this is going to be absolutely catastrophic.
The reason I play that is context is often stripped completely from what happens in Palestine and Israel. The British media often, with news events generally, act as they day one was last week. And that's how this is treated, is particularly because coverage only often happens when you get, for example, Hamas attacks in the way that they did. Just in terms of that broader context, though, and why it's important to place it in that broader context and what that tells us about what will happen next, in your view.
You're like one step further, even, contextualizing all of this in the continuous, efforts to ethnically cleanse Palestinians, from their homeland. Sarit mentioned, what is happening right now in the West Bank. She is mentioning, what is happening in Gaza. We are seeing it all. Just take it one step before that, if we want to equate, between what is happening right now, the atrocities conducted by Hamas, all of us within the Palestinian community, as well as the Palestinian solidarity movement, when we want to express, our voice, we have to, it's conditional for us to condemn Hamas, as we should, but then I don't see any, Israeli politicians going on the media and asked to condemn the Israeli regime, the very oppressive, violent, decades-long Israeli regime, and the fact that there are Jewish supremacists, openly Jewish supremacists, openly calling for the annihilation of Palestinians, not of Hamas, of Palestinians. I think, this context that you're showing is something that has been, there is a monopoly over violence, and there is a monopoly over morality that the West and the most powerful countries in the world, unfortunately, endorse. It's very difficult, you can't even get out of that to go, you don't even have the privilege to talk about 48. You have no privilege to talk about 67. You have no privilege, I can't at the moment in Israel, I don't have any right to do that. You are allowed to talk about, we have no space to mourn for both of us as people. When we are looking at the condemnation contest, then Hamas, is immediately equated with all Palestinians. Therefore, they are all rendered, animals, and, it's okay to kill as many as possible. And then we look at Israel, and, we have a government that is backing settler terrorism, that is expanding settlements, that is, displacing thousands of Palestinians from their land and from their homes in the West Bank, that is sieging Gaza, committing war crimes. And no one is expected to condemn that, while expressing solidarity for Israeli people, as they should. They should express solidarity for Israeli. They should express solidarity for Israeli citizens. We are all impacted by this, and I want everyone to do that. And I think the Palestinian solidarity movement around the world, I really invite everyone to really take the moral stand on that. But we really need to insist on, our demand. They created the rules, of condemnation and what is morality and what is not. They have the monopoly over morality, and we need to demand from them to play by their own rules, and they're not.
I mean, what you said that I think just so brilliantly speaks to the core of your racist treatment, which is, even as Palestinians have been killed in vast numbers, you have no permission to even talk about that. That if you were expected to just begin everything with a condemnation of the actions of Hamas, and even that doesn't give you permission, does it?
No, and let me be clear. I'm not condemning Hamas because I want to talk about the occupation. I'm
Of
condemning
course.
because I am extremely appalled because I'm personally impacted by this. Because I literally have colleagues right now. I've been going to funerals and to shivas, and I've been, living the loss, the catastrophe that my friends and my communities and my society is going through. It's just suffocating. To see the monopoly, here in Israel as well as around the world, for morality and for over violence and what it means and what is justified and what is not justified. And it's suffocating. It's a very, very small space to express ourselves. And I really want to thank you for this platform. And I want to say that, listening to Sarit as well, people really need to understand that the shared civil society within Israel, it's probably one of the very few places where we're able to ache and mourn both the loss of human lives while also being extremely critical of our leaderships. And this is exactly where we need to be. If we want to imagine a just and equal place, a future for all of us, we need to learn to mourn people and really without endorsing any oppressive regime. And I really want to bring that here, here in civil society, shared civil society is one of the most important things that we can strengthen right now.
Can I ask you, in terms of, for example, talking about the West Bank, now we know settlers are being armed. We know yesterday that there was an attack by settlers which killed 4 Palestinian civilians. And then at the funeral today, mourners were shot, and a father and a child, and a father and their son was shot dead.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't framed as terrorism, for example, by Western politicians, not even remarked upon. But what are your fears in terms of the West Bank, where we have huge numbers of illegal settlements, the mass colonization, the theft of Palestinian land, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from their land, which has been happening, of course, for many, many decades. But what's your fears about what this will mean for the West Bank?
It's terrifying. On Saturday, we were all in shock, trying to understand the magnitude of the attack here. And the second thought I had was like what is going, like I literally was like, there's gonna be a slaughterhouse in the West Bank. Everyone's gonna go to Gaza right now for an invasion, for a retaliation, and the West Bank, the Palestinians there are just gonna be for themselves against settlers, armed settlers, heavily armed settlers, who are probably backed by some of the soldiers as well who are left there. I think what we are going to witness is just a deepening of the military control. It's going to be a deepening of the violence, escalation of the brutal violence that the Palestinians go through in the West Bank by settlers and by army, the Israeli army. And I think we're going to see a lot of more evacuations and displacements and more posts and settlements being done there. It's very concerning.
Just the other thing I wanted to talk about, you're part, obviously, of the peace movement, an attempt to bring together Palestinians and Jews together. I mean, that's what standing together does. On the one hand, you have a policy of collective punishment being meted out by a far-right government, which has the active and unconditional support of Western powers. You also, I mean, this is important to talk about. I saw a comment which was about apartheid, and B'Tselem, the human rights organization, as well as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, term the oppression of the Palestinians as a form of apartheid. And apartheid ended through struggle, but also the sense that white South Africans had that they wouldn't be killed in the event of apartheid ending. And I just think with those two facts thrown in, that you have an increasingly radicalized majority of the population who want vengeance, the mass dehumanization of the Palestinian people, and also now in the aftermath of what happened, that sense of the idea of, well, you know, making the argument of the peace movement of living together has become much harder, which was a precondition for the fall of apartheid. What happens next? What happens next for a peace movement which has been increasingly besieged over the last few years?
Owen, you're asking very tough questions.
I know.
I think, you know, I'm crying because I feel like I've never felt, you know, people are always admiring how much we are able to maintain hope, how much we're able to maintain our ability, our belief in our ability to change. And I think in my years of activism and looking at my colleagues around me, so devastated, and it's just so raw still, I think this is the least that we have believed in our ability to change. But I also know that I don't have the privilege to lose that belief. I think, you know, if you really look, there are bright spots. You know, we have at Standing Together since Saturday have been organizing, you know, thousands and thousands of people, and we hope to get to 10,000 of people in Jewish Arab solidarity watches here in mixed cities, in mixed areas. And we are trying to do mutual aid. We're trying to really strengthen our communities and really create an alternative of what we see can happen. And, you know, our government is not giving us an alternative. The only answer they have for us is revenge and flattening Gaza and you know, killing people. And I think many people here in Israel, I want to believe that many people in Israel see that that's not the solution. I know that people are heated right now, and they are unfortunately condoning the atrocities being done in Gaza. I do think that we have the ability to build the political will within the Israeli society to look at this differently, to shift the paradigm. You know, I do, you know, that the context just before the war was a mass protest, you know, of hundreds of thousands of people against the current government, Israeli government. And we are still seeing these voices, you know, being heard about this government failing to prioritize our security while prioritizing expansion, you know, settlement expansion and backing settlers in the West Bank and creating an impossible reality for us here to be secure. And I do believe in our ability to shift that paradigm, not only through talking about peace, but also, you know, Standing Together works into connecting social justice issues and really understanding how we can build a new majority in Israeli society that understands that the majority of the people that live here, Palestinians and Jews, have the interest and the right for equality, for social justice, for prosperous society, and for peace. It's in our interest. And I think this, you know, the catastrophe that the Israeli society has been experiencing these past 6 days, I hope that we will be able to highlight the urgent need for us to build the resistance within Israeli society for peace. You know, we see the father of abducted children. We see a sister of a killed activist who are calling, saying, we don't want further killing in the name of our children. Just bring them back. We just want peace. This invasion and these war crimes and further killing of Palestinians is just not going to get us anywhere. And I really hope, and maybe I'm naive, that we will be able, that this will be a junction where we will move towards a place where we will build a larger, a stronger political will within the Israeli society that will challenge our leadership and replace it into one that can actually advance better, more humane policies.
Saleh, I just want to say thank you so much. That was incredibly powerful, and I can't even believe the level of courage right now for those of you fighting for peace in the environment you're in is astonishing. And I hope you know that there are those of us in actually greater numbers than ever now, I would say, in these countries who will stand without equivocation behind you. And it's so important we keep talking and elevating your voices. So I just want to say thank you so much, and love and solidarity.
Thank you so much, Owen. Thank you so much.
Lots of love. Take care, Sally, and thank you so much again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Incredible stuff there from Sally. It's difficult, isn't it, to just listen to what's happening on the ground. It's the coming days and weeks are going to be far worse than what's already passed, and it's important we're honest about that. And it's important that we listen to these voices in these countries as we build solidarity. Now, I'm going to bring in now, we have been running a bit late, but we've been obviously had these incredible voices. I'm bringing in Yanal Jabarin, who is a Palestinian activist based in Jerusalem. Yanal, I'm so sorry that we've been a bit delayed talking, but I really, really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're based in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, Jack, can I just take first as a Palestinian, just give me your general sense of the last few days. You can just talk to me just from the heart, how you feel, your instinctive response to the last few days.
Well, in Saturday, the bombs were in Jerusalem, I think in 8 o'clock. Saturday, it's the last day in Sukkot days. And all of us were in Jerusalem like Shabbat. And there was nothing to do in Jerusalem in Shabbat. But in 8 o'clock, I was awake, but all the bombs, all of the rocks, I heard everything, and I just need to down and make to all my neighborhood to go out their homes. I was afraid. It was the first day, I think, and it was, I don't know what happened, where it happened. I just know that we in Jerusalem have a lot of bombs. After that, we go back to see television. I see the news. I'm a journalist, and I see all of the news. It's so horrible, so difficult to imagine what happened there. After that, it took me to like 2 days to write the first thing that I thought about. I think I write the first thing. It was horrible to see and know a lot of the stories there in Saturday in the south. Just not just the party, also in the village and the kibbutz there. And after that, I also, as a Palestinian, I have to know what happened in Gaza, because the IDF, the soldiers, also bombs in Gaza now, like 5 days. And I'm in a difficult situation as an Arab, as an Israeli, as a Palestinian. I have two hats. The hat of an Israeli. A lot of my friends was in the party. My friends were also live in the south of Israel. Also, my journalist colleagues are living in Gaza. I have always talking with them all the time, and it was so difficult to hear from them also stories. That was very, very difficult for me to be in this situation, two hats, a Palestinian and an Israeli, my people as a Palestinian, and my neighborhoods, my friends as an Israeli.
Can you tell me, in terms of over the last few days, I know civil society organizations have been active on the ground and something is planned for tomorrow and Friday. Can you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, the community here in Israel prepared very good. Where is the state? Where is the soldiers? Where is the government? Didn't do the state do it. The community do it. The organizations do it. They just have a lot of people, volunteers, to make a lot of stations to help soldiers, to help in the south, Bedouin and Jewish, to help all of the poor guys already in the south. The south is the poorest area in Israel, and toys, papers, psychologies, also players of soccer teams go to the south, and after that, all of the southern people go to hotels in Eilat, in Tel Aviv, and here in Jerusalem, and that's how we go. We can also easily go there and be with them. But I think also the second thing we are doing is to calm the situation here in Israel. We don't want to restart as it was like in 2021 May, when it was very difficult to see it here in Israel between Arab and people and Jewish people. We just have to calm the teenagers. We have to calm the students. We have to calm all of the community, Arab community here, and tell them we just have to remember we are also a citizens. We're not just like a Palestinian. We are also a citizen here in Israel. We have to be at the law, at the Israeli law, to have to talk, to post, to tweet, but just in the law, not talk about Israel as a criminal war or apartheid or also anything. Because of the this situation here in Israel this time, Hamas started the war. Hamas started the murder of the Israeli people, and we just have to figure it out. We are one citizens as a citizens here in Israel. We just have to do it as a citizens. Also, if we want to critical the Israeli people and the government people.
Yeah, and I'll just to say thank you so much for joining us. I know you're just on mobile phone as you're running around, so I really appreciate it and solidarity. And please, you can follow Yanal Jabarin on social media, so please do that. But Yanal, thank you honestly so much. I really appreciate you joining us at very short notice. Take care. And finally, last but not least, I'm going to bring in Hamza Ali Shah, who is a Palestinian journalist based here in Britain. Often read your stuff, Hamza, so it's really brilliant to be able to have you join us like this. Thank you very much. I just want to start, if it's okay. I know you've been doing media, British media. Lucky you, as ever. We are blessed with that ecosystem. I want to start with this, actually, because I think it's so shocking. It just tells us a little bit about, I think it's a good jumping point, which is an interview on Newsnight with Hussam Zomlot, who heads the Palestinian mission. We don't have an embassy because Palestinian statehood is not accepted. It isn't realized. We have a mission, and he heads that. And he was being interviewed by Kirsty Rourke on Newsnight. Let's just listen to this clip.
Now, of course, there's more than 800 dead in Gaza, including members of your own extended family. What do you know what happened to them?
They were just sitting at their home, and they were simply bombarded. Their entire building was brought down. My cousin, Aya, her 2 children, her husband, her mother-in-law, and 2 other relatives died immediately, were killed instantly. And 2 of her youngest children a twin, 2 years old, are now in intensive care. This is truly heartbreaking. And the issue here, Kirsty, is that they have no bunkers, they have no Iron Dome, they have nowhere to go. They are simply sitting ducks for the Israeli war machine.
I'm sorry for your own personal loss. I mean, can I just be clear, though? You cannot condone the killing of civilians in Israel, can you? Nor the kidnapped families.
No, we don't condone. And we are very clear, Kirsty. We reject any targeting or harming of.
The video froze there for some reason on mine, but I think when people could hear the audio, which was sufficient, I just don't know where to start there. He was talking about the mass killing of his own family, and a journalist said, "Yeah, sorry for your loss. Anyway, you're going to condemn the mass murder of Israelis." What does that say? I mean, just you're a Palestinian. You're here in Britain watching this coverage unfold. What does that tell us about the way that one incident, about the way this is being covered?
I think it's a confirmation with what Palestinians have always thought of, which is that we are considered second-class citizens, or at least our lives are not worthy, because the premise that the presenter is speaking from is on the basis of innocent civilians being murdered, which of course everybody, there's nobody that is actively celebrating, or at least nobody rational anyway. But then he's just emphasized that he's lost his own, Palestinians have lost civilians, his family have been murdered as well. And that's just kind of relegated to a secondary status. It's seen as not as important as the other lives. And I think that summarizes and sums up the kind of the logic that has, dictated much of the conversation on this, which is that Palestinian lives are they're considered fair game. The death, destruction, murder, and trauma inflicted on Palestinians is considered fair game, whereas it's unspeakable and it's abominable that Israeli innocent civilians die. And it should just be the same barometer applied and the same standards set for both civilians and both parties. But obviously, that's not the case.
I mean, are you, in terms of talking to people back in the occupied territories in Israel? I mean, what are the kind of stories you're hearing that are coming off the ground that it's important that we talk about?
It's just a sense of helplessness, but at the same time, especially people in Gaza, it's the sense of, we haven't even recovered from the previous round of bombardment. This one's more vicious. This is a newer round, but it's the same feeling. It's the feeling of helplessness. It's the fact that, from what they say, this will eventually perhaps subside and it will perhaps wane, but in the end, there'll be more infrastructure that will be destroyed. More children have died. I mean, 4 in 5 children already live with depression and grief in Gaza, and this is only going to compound those matters. And in the West Bank, it's the same thing. It's the fact that this is a product of Israel's 75 years of, multifaceted oppression. It's systematic ethnic cleansing. That is why we are where we are. And too often we keep viewing things from the framework of, what happened 4 days ago, or that Saturday morning, which of course is an important moment or an important junction. But the bottom line is that this came about as a result of decades of the siege on Gaza, the occupation of Palestine, the West Bank. You've got kind of the creeping annexation, the increasing settlements, the number of prisoners detained without charge or trial, the number of Palestinians that were murdered this year before Hamas even began devising a plan to breach the border. So this is an ongoing system of Israeli oppression and systematic ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians, which has been so normalized. And it's really shocking to see figures here, particularly in Britain, that you expect better from very irresponsible sentiments. And like I said, the feeling back home is it's the same. It's helplessness. I've spoken to fellow journalists or fellow people in the field who have family back home, and they've said there's no electricity. We've sent WhatsApp messages, and we don't know if they'll ever reply. We don't know. That may be the last message we've sent. And these are things that even as we speak out loud, it's incomprehensible. It's like something out of a sick movie, and yet it's people's daily lives.
I mean, just in terms of that, the stripping away of context. I mean, the British media generally starts day one with any event, day one being 3 days ago, and tends to strip context from everything. But this is obviously particularly the case, and you get coverage when Israeli civilians are killed or Israelis are killed, and obviously, as we've said, it's horrendous when that happens. That isn't afforded to Palestinians. So this year, 248 Palestinians were killed, 40 of them children, before what currently happened. And obviously there was almost no coverage whatsoever of that. I mean, just in terms of, I mean, you know, that stripping away of context. There was a media study a few years ago, and it found that a significant chunk of the population thought that Palestine was occupying Israel. And that, I know that sounds astonishing, and many people will find that maybe difficult to believe, but that's what the findings found. And that had a lot to do with the framing of media coverage, where you often get reactive coverage to incidents involving, for example, Israeli life, whilst with Palestinian life, we just don't, let alone occupation, let alone apartheid. I mean, the fact that Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and Israeli Human Rights Organization B'Tselem, amongst many others, call it apartheid. If you try saying that on a national media organization, well, I tried it, you know, the pushback is extreme. I mean, that's what the challenge, isn't it? It's just any context based on facts is stripped away.
Yeah, and it's the fact that, for example, we use an example in the Labour Party, and people always, you know, and you know this more than anyone, they'll say, oh, why are you holding the Labour Party to a higher standard than the Conservative Party? Because the Conservative Party does what it says on the tin. They are ruthless in their worldview. The Labour Party is supposed to be an internationalist party, a progressive party, one that stands and supports liberation and freedom for everybody, irrespective of race, creed, colour, whatever it might be. And yeah, there is a double standard applied when it comes to Palestine. Keir Starmer, about a year and a half ago, maybe longer, rejected with an interview with Jewish Chronicle, rejected the use of the word apartheid. Now, he's a former human rights lawyer. He knows how forensic and rooted in law and, you know, conclusive research these reports are. And he just rejects them casually, just because, for whatever reason, you know, it might be, he's conflating it. He said, because this is a new party and, you know, this is a new, but who said you have to, you know, this is a complete dereliction of duty? Who said anything to do with criticizing Israel, anything to do with anti-Semitism and the new look of the party that you're after? So in Britain, like you said, Palestinians are never given a voice, and as the ambassador or the head of the mission pointed out brilliantly on the media numerous times, it's the fact that, like you said, we've had several Palestinians murdered this year, several homes demolished, communities displaced, settler violence has gone up. It's at a record level. We've seen more annexation, more settlements erected in the West Bank. At no point have I seen anybody on BBC, Sky, or elsewhere being asked to condemn Israel's actions, and then suddenly something happens, which is like a flashpoint, which like you said, that starts a conflict off for them. That is now the starting point for all intents and purposes, and it's a deliberate, inaccurate reading of history.
Just that point about the Labour Party, and I'm just going to show a clip now from Emily Thornberry, who's the Shadow Attorney General. Pretty important, because that means she sets the tone of the legal position of the Labour Party. She's also my local MP, I should say. I've known her for many years. Let's just play this clip on Newsnight.
Do you think cutting off food, water and electricity is within international law?
I think that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself against terrorism.
That's not the question I asked.
It is an answer to the question that you've asked, and I think it's an appropriate one at this time.
She was asked about a war crime. I mean, what she was asked was, do you think Israel has the right to commit war crimes? That's essentially what she was asked. It is illegal under international law to impose collective punishment. It is illegal under international law to cut off food, electricity and water from a civilian population. And the Shadow Attorney General of the British Labour Party sat there and responded that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself. I mean, that is the Labour Party leadership lining up in support of war crimes against a civilian population. And I should note, actually, that there's been a resignation. Let me just make sure I get the title right of the resignation. Oh, yeah. So it's the Young Labour's BAME officer has just resigned, saying it is with a heavy heart that today I've handed in my resignation for my role as the Young Labour BAME officer. As a Palestinian with direct family in Gaza, I'm absolutely appalled by the comments made to LBC by the leader of the Labour Party, my local MP, Keir Starmer. This is another interview. He said that Israel has the right to withhold water and electricity. Collective punishment is a war crime under international law. This position was then reaffirmed by Emily Thornberry. I've spent the last few days worried about the safety of my family. With electricity now cut off and communication limited, these worries are only exacerbated. I received zero support from the Labour Party, a common theme experienced by other Muslim Palestinian members. The comments from the leadership this week have been the last straw. I can only conclude the Labour Party is no longer a safe space for Palestinians and Muslims, and that is Lubaba Khalid. Just your response to that.
Yes, it's unsurprising, and it's a sentiment I've had people message me over the last few days and reach out and say, do you know what this is? I think it's about time that we hold the Labour leadership to account, because this has been a long time coming. If you remember the Batley and Spen by-election, the way that I think there was a comment once from one of the journalists who said this is about Palestine, not Peter. It's become about Palestine, not Peter, for the Labour Party. This obsession, and like I said, it's the dehumanization of Palestinians, and Keir Starmer himself and the leadership around him and the key figures have for a long time neglected and overlooked the Palestinian cause, and as we mentioned, the rejection of the word apartheid and the continuous, when the numerous rounds in which Israel has pummeled Gaza since Keir Starmer became leader, it's the same robotic recitations that he transmits. He says Israel has the right to defend itself. Emily Thornby's comments there again. She's not alone, because David Lammy was on LBC when asked, and he said, "I back a ground invasion." Now, Gaza is widely recognized as an open-air prison. It's considered by UN Secretary General as hell on earth. Why on earth is David Lammy asking for a humanitarian catastrophe to be made worse? A ground invasion would be detrimental to it will unleash carnage on a scale perhaps unseen in Gaza. Even in Gaza, it's unseen. And so this is it seems like this is the top line from the Labour Party, and it's a complete dereliction of duty. It's an encouragement and green lighting war crimes, and as I said, as the hypocrisy of the European Commission in I think a tweet you shared, von der Leyen last year calling starving populations as a war crime, and imposing that on when it was Russia, and now they can't commit to the same sentiments when it's happening in Gaza. So I think that we'll see a lot of reactions, not just from the Labour Party, but broadly, where people are effectively fed up, and this may be the last straw for a lot of people. But I, from a personal experience, have just in the last 40 hours, people have reached out, and I've spoken to people who've said the line coming from the Labour Party is it's the straw that broke the camel's back. And my automatic response is, well, it should have been ages ago. But obviously, the Labour Party now, I suspect this will be a major issue for a lot of people who otherwise might have given Labour Party benefit of the doubt.
And finally, just in terms of, for those of us who support standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people in this really bleak, dark moment, there is a demonstration in London, a national demonstration, which I'll be taking part in, and I hope everyone listening or watching to this, if they listen or watch it before Saturday, join and take part and spread the word as much as possible. Also, in terms of donating to, in particular, to Medical Aid for Palestine and other such organisations. What would you call on people right now? People, those of us who stand in solidarity for Palestine, who are in, for example, Britain or in the global north. What do you think is so crucial as a Palestinian speaking to that broader audience?
I think we've seen attempts to at least fight back against some of the narrative. I think that's important, even though a lot of people have said the media is controlling, the dominant narrative will prevail. But actually, even just having discussions like these and standing in solidarity, checking up on Palestinians' loved ones, people who are enduring these realities, and obviously I know there is a particular campaigns are being particularly targeted. There are attempts to silence, but wherever it might be, if you check out Palestine Solidarity Campaign, the work they're doing, the work that they encourage, whether it's boycotts, the divestment, etc., different non-violent forms of resistance. There are a lot of things ongoing, and I know Britain is clamping down on a lot of these avenues, but it's instilling that fear, and we shouldn't give in to that fear. There are a lot of avenues, like you said. There are protests. There are, even just new media and getting your voice out there in demonstrations at the local level, student level as well, engaging with people. And like I said, it's just challenging that dominant narrative and standing in solidarity with the Palestinians, because it's clear that they're short of allies in the international community. So what role we can play is paramount.
Hamza, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us at really, really short notice. To follow Hamza on Twitter, you can do that, Hamza_A96, including articles he writes for the likes of Tribune, Novara, Dazed, Byline Times, Left Foot Forward. It's really important at the moment that we elevate Palestinian voices, and I'll be doing that myself on social media and on my channel, podcast, and so on. And I hope that others, however small or big your platform is, will try and do the same, because that's what's That's what's needed so desperately at the moment. But honestly, Hamza, I really, really appreciate it. So thank you. Solidarity is over, and I will be myself. In fact, I'm just retweeting your latest article, just pushing your work as best I can. But cheers, Hamza, and solidarity.
Appreciate that, and like I said, it doesn't go unnoticed. A lot of the work I've had people reach out, family members, honestly, who've said, like, shared clips and be like, I watch this of Owen Jones, I've watched his clips, I've shared his clips. So it doesn't go unnoticed. And like the last point I made, these small things do matter. And platforming Palestinians, we're sure of allies, and the work you do is vitally important and very much appreciated.
Well, it should just be the bare minimum, to be honest. But thank you. And if only we had a different media ecosystem where we had more voices who were prepared to do that. And we're working on it. So, people like yourself. All right. Take care, Hamza. I'll speak to you soon.
Pleasure.
Take care. Brilliant stuff there. Oh, sorry. I trapped Hamza's taken over. That was a coup. I just let Hamza take over the whole channel. Take care. I'll speak to you soon. Brilliant stuff there. I'm just going to go through some of the super chats. And I was going to go through them with some of the guests, but I didn't. It was so important that we just let them speak obviously as long as possible. Hello there. A lot of what's happening here and indeed around the world is due to Western and British imperial intervention. Do you know what I mean? Yes, absolutely, and that obviously goes particularly here. I mean, you used to have the mandate in Palestine under British rule, and I have to say, we're going to do some basic historical lessons here, guys. What happened there? I don't know if obviously people, again, context. A few days generally applied to what's happening here. Self-described Zionist militias undertook terrorist bombing campaigns in the run-up to the foundation of Israel. Not something you get heard about. Take the Irgun, for example, who bombed the King David Hotel in 1948 and killed around 90 mostly civilians, who are now venerated by the Israeli government, and their leading figures ended up prime minister and the like. Erased from history because, there's almost a sense of, there's a difference here in terms of how the Palestinians have, what they've done and what's come before them. But civilians were targeted in terrorist attacks by, amongst others, those who founded the State of Israel. And what we've seen throughout, I'm afraid, the world is the role of the British Empire historically, in terms of carving up land and the conflicts it's exacerbated and left behind and nurtured. And of course, the way the West has behaved for much of the last few decades, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and of course, Palestine with their support of Israel. It's very important we make this. People don't like history, do they? Often don't like that historical context, but you cannot understand the evil, the horrors of this world unless we look at what came before it. It's really important that you made that point. David Barata, what is the likelihood of this war spiraling into a much larger conflict across the Middle East? I think is a really important point. And the problem is so much misinformation is flying around at the moment, in terms of, you get reports of incursions from Lebanon and then it turns out not to be the case. But there is a danger of a war that broadens and involves, Syria, Lebanon, Iran. It's very disturbing and worrying. And, we don't know. There's the point as well about what happens in terms of talk about Egypt. Because I know though there was some talking sometimes, from a good place, about Egypt taking in refugees from Gaza, but there's a danger of just the entire population of Gaza being emptied in a new Nakba. Nakba is the catastrophe, as the Palestinians call it, in 1948 when they're driven from their homes. And you get a new Nakba where they're driven from Gaza and they never come back. And they're driven into the Sinai desert, which is what Egypt believes, actually, whatever I think about the Egyptian regime, by the way, which is an abhorrent dictatorship in its own right. But yeah, that's also a danger which we need to be very, very clear about. FSM is the dog, far-right politicians siding with the far-right government. Look, it's important to point out it's a far-right government because do you know what was so astonishing? You know what? You could almost, before Israel, decades ago, had at least this image of having this kind of like, the Zionist socialist, the kibbutz and all the rest of it. This kind of progressive sort of veneer, even though it was based on the deprivation of Palestinians' right to national self-determination. This is a far-right government. I mean, you've got essentially, self-described centre-left politicians cheering on a government, to the right of Donald Trump. I mean, that's what, when they're talking about solid stand with Israel, there's a far-right government which is talking in the way you'd expect far-right government to talk about, in terms of how they've dehumanized the Palestinian people, and they're talking about unleashing unspeakable horrors. But yeah, it's not just far-right politicians. I'm sorry, It's an important point to make. It's people who clearly aren't. Whatever I think about Margaret Hodge, she's not far right. And she says, well, I don't stand with the, Benjamin Netanyahu's government. I've always opposed it. And yet found it an affront to talk about the reality for the Palestinian people. Dingus Van Sant, Labour's horribly weak and insensitive response to this crisis left me feeling I'm likely to spoil my ballot in the next general election. Well, I can more than sympathise with that. I'm going to do a video shortly about what Labour has said because it really needs a response. Kieran Buckley, Hamas attacks were unjustifiable, but politicians and regular people wanting to see normal Palestinians both suffer and killed is truly sickening. Agreed. FSM as the dog, supporters of Ukraine support Israel, go figure. Well, look, I support Ukraine's right to defend itself from an illegal and a brutal invasion by Russia. But yeah, I mean, the point that was actually made before, actually really important point. Let me just bring up, this is Ursula. Hold on, let me just, did I bring this up before? I'm not sure. It's been a long, it's been a long show, and it's important, obviously, that we talk about this at great length. But anyway, Ursula von der Leyen, who is the European president of the president of the EU Commission, and she tweeted yesterday, at the dawn of Shabbat last Saturday, the whole world woke up in horror. The terrorist attacks by Hamas is an act of war, and we fully support Israel's right to defend itself. Europe stands with Israel in this tragedy. Now, she tweeted a few months ago, Russia's attacks against civilian infrastructure, especially electricity, are war crimes, cutting off men, women, children of water, electricity, and heating, winter coming. These acts are pure terror, and we have to call it as such. I mean, it's beyond, you cannot make this shit up, to be blunt. Cov F channel, I would just love to have you on YouTube channel. I'll probably have to check what the channel is. DM me on Twitter. I will look out for that DM. Thank you for emphasizing what should not be controversial. War crimes are war crimes, no matter who they're committed against. Amen. It's time for a more ambitious BDS campaign is Israel. Well, I think, to be honest, it's just about building broader support for the existing BDS campaign, which is boycott, divestment, and sanctions, modelled on the movement against apartheid in South Africa. David Watter, why does the media and Western government turn a blind eye to and even support the atrocities committed by Israel? Well, yeah, I mean, Israel is a strong, staunch ally of the West. I mean, it's not just unique to Israel, this. Look at Saudi Arabia, head-chopping, murderous dictatorship, which deprives women of basic rights, which beheads gays and dissidents, which dismembers journalists, which carpet bombs Yemen and slaughters children. Turkey, I saw Turkey. The Erdogan, the autocratic leader of Turkey, grandstanding actually against Israel and talking about, how it's a war crime against Gaza. Well, agreed. But look how his regime treats the Kurds. So it's important, this is a question of allies of the West and their behavior in a general sense. State daft persecution on any side is appalling, especially when the corrupt West has your back. I mean, that's the point. That's why people go, what about Hamas? What about Hamas? Well, we condemned Hamas over and over again. Hamas is not armed and backed by us. Israel is. Very important point. And finally, Deborah, I said, thank you for speaking out for Palestine and speaking the truth on TV and your platform. You're a hero. I'm not a hero. Thank you, David. Not a hero. But we do need more voices to speak out. And I won't stop doing so. But, I'm trying to elevate other voices. But I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate everyone's brilliant, insightful thoughts and comments, and I really appreciate all our guests. It's run on late, and I hate eating into Navarra's time, so I'm going to suggest you all go to Navarra now. I will be doing lots of these interviews and videos about Palestine. We're going to do our best to offer an alternative, and to offer a platform to voices who are otherwise ignored. It's so important right now. And we do, let's make sure any of us who can attend the demonstration on Saturday in London. If we can donate, I'll try to do a video to encourage people to donate. Gruesome stuff, but it's important, isn't it, to speak out, and especially when you have a united political establishment abandoning the Palestinian people in this desperate time. All right, guys. Thank you so much, everyone. Lots of love. Press like and subscribe. You can keep the channel going as ever on patreon.com/OwenJones84. And I look forward to speaking to you all soon. Take care. Lots of love.